The 8-step selling process. Again, this is, in my opinion, a huge fundamental steps in owning a successful sales agency that a lot of people just feel like they bypass, because a lot of people feel like they are just so conversational,
right,
and they're advising. They don't need a sales process because it's just a conversation, and there is a point to that, but every conversation has to have, every sales process has to have a structure,
right,
a good map as to how to navigate the sales process, because not only will it be a good map and a good guidance for you, but it also makes the client experience much better, because you're not scrambling, you seem much more prepared.
For sure.
And now a lot of people will also tell me, Olivia, I can't do the same sales process every single time because I have a clients with all sorts of different situations. I have Medicaid clients. I have clients who make more money than God himself. I have, all these situations. And the way that I would counteract that is talking about how the sales process or your sales appointment should be ran like a doctor's office.
Right.
I go to the doctor's office. I don't go very often, but when I do, I've never been to the doctor for the same reason twice. Literally in the same week, I went to the doctor because I had a piece of 3-year-old glass in my foot that just decided to make an appearance again. And then, don't judge. And then I also in that same week had a horrible sinus infection. And so I went to the doctor, 2 very different ends of my body,
right,
2 very different situations, and the process was the exact same. The only time where things really got different is whenever you're presenting the solution. And we'll talk about that today in the sales process. So again, you go in, you sit down with the doctor, you fill out some paper forms, you sit in the waiting room, they take your height, your weight, you lie anyways, but they're still going to do it. Sit in the doctor's office for it seems like probably hours, even though they tell you to get there 10 minutes early. And then you see the doctor. It's the same way every single time. So let's talk about, again, what a lot of people consider the sales process is a natural flow of conversation, and that is great, but we want to give you the backbone or the structure to the sales appointment so that you can let your personality shine through. The sales process is a process. It is science. Your personality and your take on that process is what makes it an art. So that's what we'll be talking about today.
I would think that the argument that every client I have is completely different would be a good argument for having some sort of structure, because that way you know that with all the different ways, all the different conversations you have, all the different personalities that you're working with, it's a way to make sure that you're still covering all the bases that you need to. So I feel like the argument, this is, that's an argument for why this is such a good idea, to have a process, to have a flow, to have something that you can make sure, like I said, covering all your bases throughout your appointment.
Exactly. And to Brian's point, he brings up an excellent point. Practice the way you play the game, fools. I agree, Brian.
That wasn't the point I thought you were going to mention that he made.
Oh, the fact that I didn't go to the doctor as a kid, they took me to the vet. The vet was closer. My doctor was like an hour and a half away. The vet was down the road. Not important, Brian. Not important. So this is the 8-step selling process, guys. We're going to knock down each one of these step by step and kind of talk about what each one of them is, with the exclusion of step 1 and step 8. So step 1, just like we talked about the door opener, that is just how you are introducing why you are there or why you're in your office and what led to that point. So if they are somebody who is they returned a mailer, then you send out, you requested some information about Medicare, about dental vision hearing. If they came to a seminar of yours, and this is the follow-up appointment, you then revisit that seminar. So what the door opener is, all it is doing is setting that common ground and really explaining why you are there. Plus, okay. And then we'll talk about why we aren't going into too deep of step 8 right now. But step 1, the door opener, specifically saying why you were there, that common ground, what brought you into their home, what brought you into their computer, what brought them into your office that day. Any questions on that, let us know.
I do think there's one thing to keep in mind with this. These are the 8 steps that we have. These are essentially us saying these are all the bases that you need to cover. When you get in there and you're kind of taking on your own version of this, you might kind of end up, we kind of talked about this earlier, you might end up morphing 2 of these steps together and calling it one thing. But we have it split out, laid out into an 8-step selling process just to show you these are all the different bases that you need to cover through an appointment. It might be 6 steps for you. It might be 5 if you morph some together. It might be 9, who knows? But yes, just keep that in mind while we go through this.
So let's go ahead and start with step number 2. After the door opener is how you set that appointment or even the appointment setting process. Let's start in with step number 2, which is the warm up. So there's really kind of 2 warm-ups that we have. They're done same concept, same idea, but 2 different processes. And the warm-up is going to be for new clients and a different warm-up for current clients. Now, how long should this last? I'm going to tell you what, guys, a good appointment process that we talk about when you really do get down to it, you practice it, when it becomes that scientific habit, an appointment really can last between 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And we work with a lot of agents that have 2-hour appointments. If you have a 2-hour appointment, really where the time should be taken up is the warm-up process only for current clients, okay? We'll talk about that here in a little bit. We'll talk about where most people spend those 2 hours, which is just ridiculous. So a good appointment length is 35 minutes to 45 minutes. If it does go long, it should be because of the warm-up process, and that's because you're giving your clients, and really gauging how comfortable they are with you in that situation. So brand new to you clients. Well, let's first start with current clients because that's where a lot of people, it's an easier one. If you're warming up with a current client, what you're doing in that process is reminding them about the friendship that you have, bringing up comments that you've made in your CRM that shows that you remember them and that you remember their situation. So you're asking them questions that you learned in the previous appointment, their dogs, their kids, their hobbies, really showing them that you are friends, not just a client advisor situation.
Yes, you're establishing that, hey, we have this relationship. I haven't forgotten about you. It's reminding them of all the relational capital that you've worked so hard to build up throughout the years.
Relational capital. I'm stealing that. That's a good one.
Thanks. Yes, so that's what this time is for. It's really, really important because that will completely affect the vibe, that will completely affect how they trust you, how they listen to you throughout the rest of the conversation that you have with them throughout the rest of the appointment. So this warm up is really, this is not something to skip over.
For sure. Now with new clients, it is going to look a little bit different. The warm-up is different for new clients versus current. New clients, reminder that you may not have, if they don't know you from Adam and you're meeting them for the first time, you don't really have the relationship with them to ask them those hobby questions or sometimes a lot of times those personal questions because they know they're there for business. A lot of times they want to sit down, get to business, and get the whole process over. So for new clients, instead of trying to get to know them on a personal level or asking them questions that aren't necessarily geared towards the appointment or aren't necessarily necessary to the appointments, what I like to do for new clients is to set the expectation of the appointment. It was really interesting. Stephen King had a really interesting quote that was talking about, if you notice in Stephen King, the movies of a lot of times that he's doing, he says that I never make sure that I always leave the endings unsure because there's nothing more frightful for a human than the unknown. And they said that's why I can write the scariest books and have the scariest movies, but I never have a definite end. They always in the unknown. And the same thing goes is because people want to know what to expect next. So you're literally outlining the appointment to them. So I have kind of what I say written down as far as how I navigate a client through the appointment, but it's so if Sadie, you're my client, it's gonna be something along the lines of, again, make it your own. Sadie, first I'm gonna ask some questions to you to kind of get to know you more personally, to get to know your situation. Then I'm gonna give you some information and recommendations based on other clients that I've had in similar situations to you. And that's gonna be based on what your goals are and kind of what your budget is. We'll then get you qualified for those plans because you will have to answer some health questions to make sure you can get those plans. And we'll fill out the applications. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you all the perks of what it's like to be one of my clients. I just walk Sadie through all 8 steps of that sales process in a sentence so that when she knows if I'm asking you about your height, your weight, your finances later, I've already told you we're going to have that conversation.
Right.
So it's not going to come out of nowhere.
Right.
So that is, again, what I consider the warm-up process. Again, if you guys have any questions or need us to slow down or need us to reiterate anything, feel free to throw in the comments. We're going to move on to step number 3, and probably the most important step in a sales process, and this is the fact-finding portion. Again, these numbers that you're seeing next to each step is about how many minutes you should take for this step. So the fact-finding is really usually about a 10-minute process, one of the longest points of this presentation. And again, it's because all cross-selling happens in the fact-finding portion of the appointment. And so there's kind of 2 ways that we do fact find. There's the conversation fact finding method, and then there's the form utilization fact finding method. So we'll go into the form. I do have an agency out of Macon, Missouri that has one of the most beautiful forms that I've ever seen as far as fact finding goes. And they run their office like a doctor's office. They have a waiting room, they have a receptionist, they fill out this fact finding form, and then the agent will discuss that form with them. But it'll have questions like, who's your current provider? Have you been to the hospital in the last 12 months? Now, these are questions you need to know to see if they're going to pass through some underwriting.
Right.
But more importantly, it'll ask questions like, how concerned are you with getting diagnosed with cancer? Are you aware that 60% of costs associated with cancer are non-medical related costs? How concerned are you with keeping your farm if you end up in the nursing home? Really important things about these forms, they're not asking about hospital indemnity, long-term care. They're putting it in ways that seems real to the client. They're not using jargon. They're making it very clear to understand what exactly that they're asking. So if you're on that form, they say, okay, this person is not concerned at all with cancer insurance. Then throughout the appointment, they say, hey, I noticed you didn't really, you weren't interested in talking about cancer, but just know if something changes, know that I offer some help for that. So give me a call first.
Right, exactly.
And then the other type of fact finding is more the conversation. One is not better than the other. I like the form utilization better because then you have it on record, and you can kind of see how that client changes year to year when you do your annual appointments. I like form utilizations. A lot of agents really like the freedom that comes with the conversations. If you are going to do the conversations, you really have to focus on your transitional phrasing. So asking questions out loud, like, are you aware how Medicare works once you leave the hospital? Of course, we're talking about home health care and short-term care insurance. Asking questions like, in the event that you need care at home, who is coming to your house? Who are you relying on helping you recover outside of the hospital? Asking questions like, how concerned are you with the cancer cost? Things like that. But making sure, again, that, and what's something that the conversation method versus the form method, one advantage that it does have is that the conversation method allows you to kind of put some insecurity with the client, making them concerned with their situation, because they don't know, how cancer insurance works. They don't know the need behind dental, vision, hearing. It's your job to kind of explain that need, but if you do it in a conversational way, it plants that seed of concern of, hey, you're not covered for this, or hey, you're uneducated about how this works. So the idea here is to get them uncomfortable with their situation. Not a fear tactic, very different, not a fear tactic, but the idea here is to get them uncomfortable with their situation, but then only works if they're really comfortable with you. As their agent.
I think that is one thing, is being able to have these actual conversations. I think over time will help build the relationship. There'll be a lot more trust there, but also there's something about saying it out loud that really puts an emphasis on it. So it kind of makes people think about it a little bit more. That's basically what you were saying, rather than just going through a form and filling it out. That can just feel like, mindless paperwork sort of stuff. But there is something about saying it out loud and having that conversation that will definitely make it a little bit more real. Emphasize. Real.
It makes it real. And I would, if it were me, I would do both of them. I would have the form from continuity, and so that everybody gets the same questions, and I know for sure that I brought these products, but you have the conversation about the form to make that real, to kind of hit on all ends. Last thing I'm going to say about fact finding is throughout this entire process, especially with the fact finding, you have to ask open-ended questions. Do not ask yes or no questions. Open-ended questions will entice them to tell stories, and when they tell stories, they will get more emotionally involved in the conversation.
Right.
People buy off of emotion. They use logic to justify that purpose, but they use emotion to make the purpose. So the sooner that you can evoke the emotion, and that is in the fact-finding process, the more likely you are going to have the sale, and even on top of that, multiple sales. So let's move on to number 3, and that is educate and uncover need. Thanks. And again, this is about a 10-minute process. I will say this is where the majority of agents find themselves in a lot of trouble, especially my veteran agents, because veteran agents want to show their value in educating. They want to show how intelligent they are and how much they know about Medicare. So when we talk about people having 2-hour-long appointments, this is where they spend the majority of the appointments because they educate too much. They tell their clients everything they need to know about Medicare, and honestly, when it comes to education, the only thing your clients care about is exactly how it directly impacts them. Do they care about the specific Part A deductible? Do they care about the price of rice in China? No, they care about what it is. They care about really 3 things. How much is it going to cost them? Can they see their doctor? And can they take their prescriptions? And beyond that, it's all kind of gibberish. So you spend the majority of the appointment educating on those 3 things. They don't need to have a Medicare 101. They don't need to know how Medicare even works when they leave that appointment. They need to know how you, Mr. or Miss Agent, is going to help them navigate Medicare. I don't go to a mechanic for them to teach me how to change my oil. I go to a mechanic so that they can change my oil.
And it is hard to be fair, it is hard to find that line whenever you have all of this knowledge. It's hard to find that line, especially when you get on a roll of, am I educating them enough or am I educating them too much? So it is a hard line to kind of find, but that's the reason why having maybe a process like this can help save you time, especially in portions like this. It can help keep you on track, and it can help you cover, I'm going to say it again, cover all the bases that you need to without crossing the line of, okay, I'm way over educating this, because this is, like she said, this is the portion of the process that we see people taking an hour. No one wants to sit in anyone's office for over an hour.
No.
So yeah.
So again, there's 2 educations. There's one for a current client and one for a new client. And when I say new client, I don't mean new to Medicare client. I mean new to you, because you don't know what kind of education they got prior to you being their agent. If they use a call center person, they're trying to push a product, or if I use an agent that hasn't sold insurance since 1982 and they aren't up to date with what's going on today. So you always make sure if they're new to you, you give them the 10-minute 2 pathways presentation. And if you're curious about what the full 2 pathways presentation looks like, we do have a video on our university of an agent actually doing the presentation and showing how they present MedSups versus Medicare Advantage plan. So we do have that. This is a page in the Medicare and You handbook, and it is by far the best presentation to teach somebody what they need to know about Medicare. 90% of what they need to know about Medicare and MedSups versus Medicare Advantage is this little page right here. I believe it's page 5 or 6 of the Medicare and You handbook. But again, we just do 2 pathways and educate on the pros and cons of choosing a MedSup over a Medicare Advantage plan. Now, through this process as well, the number one thing you're going to be focusing on isn't necessarily what Medicare does cover, because that's too easy. You really want to focus on what Medicare doesn't cover. And it's not because you want to get the sale, but it's because you don't want to get a call from your client when they go to the dentist and find out that their filling isn't covered by Medicare. The first person they're going to call is you, because you didn't tell them that they weren't going to get coverage for that. So making sure that in your education process, we do focus on what Medicare doesn't cover more so than what it does, because Medicare is going to do what Medicare is going to do, and people are familiar with that concept. Now, if they are a current client, you review and educate. So basically, and the questions that I ask on this part of it with the education is I ask my client questions like, what has changed in the past year? Have you gotten any more diagnosis? Do you have any more specialists that you're seeing? How, if they're on the Medicare Advantage plan, it's how did you like your plan this year? Was it easy to use? Did you use those bells and whistles that you were really interested in? And more so, especially on a current client, because they don't necessarily need that Medicare 101, maybe just a review on how that plan works, but more so focusing on exposed risk, which is why I like going back to the previous forums. Like last year, Sadie, when you and I met, you said that you weren't really interested in dental, vision, hearing. How are you feeling now? Are you seeing a lot of your friends having to get dentures, a lot of your friends having to get crowns and things like that? Has that changed for you at all? So again, revisiting back in your CRM, what did you talk about in the past? What haven't you brought up to them? And on making sure, again, more so focusing on what has changed and make sure they know what Medicare is not going to cover. So that is 10 minutes of educating and uncovering the need. So once they're educating and you're talking to them, you've done your fact finding, you've done all that, the next part of this is going to be presenting the solutions. And by presenting the solutions, I don't mean you need a United Healthcare Medicare Advantage plan with this benefit. I don't mean you need a Mutual of Omaha Medicare supplement. What we're doing at this point is strictly just presenting, and presenting the solution comes in 2 points. Present the solution point A. All you're doing is saying, this is the benefit package that I'm going to recommend for you based on your travel, based on your budget, based on this. So, and a great transitional phrase for this conversation is going to be something along the lines of, so Sadie, based on the information you told me, based on kind of your budget and your lifestyle, I would suggest you getting a Medicare supplement with a prescription drug plan, and I actually would recommend us adding a dental benefit to that as well. I have other clients in your situation or similar situation take this route and it's worked out for them. Let's try it for a year and then we can revisit and see how that worked for you. So one thing I really like for this is that there is a very simple way here. That last part that says, let's see if this works for you. This is your close. And at this point, this is the first time, we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but this is the first point in the entire conversation that you are not asking an open-ended question. You are saying yes or no.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but this is where you kind of suggest and say, this is the package I recommend for you today. Let's see if this works for you. So once you kind of get that, only after they agree to the package is when you start again offering, and this is where you actually start shopping plans. So this is when you get out your quote engine. This is when you get out Medicare Center and actually start running those plan options and seeing what Med Sup is going to fit your client best, what's Medicare Advantage is going to fit your client. And then again, this is when you kind of the two-part close. Then you ask them, this is your true closing statement. We can have this start April 1st. Does that work for you? Yes or no? Yes or no. It is not an open-ended question. And again, that's something, one thing I really like about when we get to this point, when you do start shopping plans, especially when we get into policies like cancer insurance or hospital indemnity plans, I like to do what I call the takeaway close. And it's saying, well, before we even get to like pricing and things like that, let me make sure that you even qualify for this plan. Because when you kind of take it away for them, it makes them want it that much more.
Right.
Or it makes them truly realize if they want it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, if I'm a typical wife, and if my husband says, what do you want to eat? And I say, I don't know, you pick, and I say no to everything. We all can relate.
Right.
That's my duty as a wife. But it's kind of like if you like flip, like, okay, we're going to go heads, we go this place, tails, we go this place. And you flip a coin and it lands and you're like, ooh, I actually don't like that. I want the other one better.
Right.
It's the same thing. If you take away and say, we may not be able to get you this, we have to see if you qualify first, it will either solidify that they really want it, or it'll let you know, hey, they're going to cancel this policy as soon as that first premium comes out, which both is extremely, extremely important. So making sure, again, first you say, let's make sure you get them qualified. As you're doing that, you're going through the application, looking at the underwriting questions. So by the time you do get to the application process, the application's already halfway filled out.
Yeah.
So we talked about this here a little bit ago. We get into the, are they saying yes? Are they saying no? We're getting to the finite point of the application of point of the process where you're asking for the close. If they say no, No is not bad. If you're somebody who you say, I've never been told no, I have a 100% closing ratio on policies, I hate to break it to you, that actually is a bad sign.
It's suspicious.
It's suspicious. What that tells me is that you are an order taker, not an advisor. Because as an advisor, you need to hear no. Because because they're going to buy these policies from somebody, or I will say this, they're going to hear about these policies from somebody. It may be Joe Namath. It may be, whoever replaces Alex Trebek, rest his soul. And it's, I don't know, that's probably not appropriate, but still, if they're going to hear about them from somewhere, they might as well hear it from you. If they tell you no, it just means no right now.
Yeah.
So again, they're going to hear about it from somebody. It might as well be you. Now, if they say no, ask why. We have a whole different training on overcoming objections. What's worse than hearing no is hearing something along the lines of, let me think about it.
Yeah.
Let me talk to somebody about it. Let me sleep on it. More times than not, if you hear one of those things, it's because they don't value or trust you. So you didn't warm up correctly. You didn't set the expectations very well. They don't see value in the plan, which means you didn't educate very well. You didn't educate on the risk very well, or they don't feel the urgency. Again, coming back to that evaluating the risk and honestly the fact-finding portion. Right. So again, if you guys have questions on overcoming objections, we will be making some videos on that, having some conversations on that, and webinars on that. But there's some really cool trainings on the 5 steps to overcome an objection. Everything comes in steps. Everything's a process.
Everything's a process.
So at this point, any questions, guys? Let us know. At this point, we are finally at the true application process, and this is where you cool down. At this point in the process, if it's a brand new client, you have earned the right and earned the relationship to ask them more hobby and personal questions. So this is kind of the small talk portion of it. You're going through it, but this is where you really like, what's your dog's name? What do you guys do for fun? Tell me about some hobbies. It really, at this point, you've kind of earned that relationship and they can relax and have that conversation with you. I would also say if you forgot to talk about a product throughout the appointment, so like if you're like, ooh, I remember they mentioned cancer in the beginning, I forgot to talk about cancer insurance, tell them, hey, I know we're done with this appointment, but next time we get together, we really need to talk about cancer appointment. Let's go ahead and set our cancer insurance. Let's set up a follow-up appointment. You've done so. It's kind of like if you go to like a clothing store and you go and you buy a shirt and then you're in the checkout line, you pay with your card, you're thinking about Auntie Anne's, you're thinking what you're going to do next. And if the cashier goes, oh, hey, can we go ahead and get you a tie with this? Or can we get you a pair of pants with this? You probably need those things, but you're already checked out. You're on to the next thing. It works the exact same way here. So if you don't bring it up, if you've got a product and you didn't bring it up, set a follow-up appointment and have that conversation next time. Mm-hmm. Do e-applications. They're the best. E-applications through and through. The biggest thing if you're going to do an e-application, be really aware of the technological barrier and make sure that they can see your screen. Because if there's a physical screen between you and the client, you want them to see the underwriting questions that they're asking. If they're height or weight challenge, you want to know like why they're asking those questions. So go ahead and do it that way, but more so you just want to genuinely eliminate the technological barrier there. Right. We're moving on, guys, to once the application is done. This next part is step 7, and that is setting the expectations. I genuinely believe that setting the expectations, success is measured by how well expectations are met. So the important thing here is to make sure they know time frames more than anything. You have to be really, when you set the expectations, you're eliminating something that we call buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse happens whenever somebody's regretting the decision. And this is a significant decision. It's their healthcare you're talking about. So making sure they say, if they're going through underwriting, saying, we'll have an underwriting decision here in the next week. You'll be receiving your phone calls. We'll be hearing from the company in the next 2 weeks. You'll be receiving your Medicare cards, your Medicare supplement cards, your Advantage cards by the 1st of the next month. So again, because like if somebody gets an underwriting decision in 2 days, we think, holy cow, that was really fast. if the client is expecting a decision the next day because you didn't set the expectation, then they're already setting off on a bad foot with that carrier, and you're going to see an increase of that buyer's remorse. So set the expectation not only from what they should be receiving from the carrier, but also from what they should be getting from you, so that they shouldn't be surprised that you're calling them during AEP. They shouldn't be surprised to receive your newsletter. You're setting the expectation that it's not a one-time sale, that this is the beginning of a relationship. It's the beginning of a partnership as far as the advisor role that you now play in their healthcare.
Right. It also, you know, it doesn't just affirm that you will be reaching out to them in the future, but also it affirms that they have the ability to contact you again. So if there's, it kind of gives them a peace of mind that, you know, if they go into this and they really, really hate it, you know, they can talk to some, they can have a conversation, they can figure out their options. They just don't feel like they know that they're not just going to be dropped.
Right.
They're going to, like you said, just continue a, they're always going to be taken care of anytime that they need, whether it be us reaching out to them or them, you know, allowing them to reach out to us.
Yeah, more importantly, because if they reach out to Medicare and you wrote them on a Medicare Advantage plan or a Part D, that's a complaint. So you always want to set the expectation, I'm your first call, nobody else.
Right.
So again, here's an example of what the expectations can look like. You kind of see the path of what to tell a client to do. I think the most important part is talking about when they will receive their cards and the annual review. Again, making sure that you are setting the expectation that you do need to meet with them on an annual basis, that they should not call a 1-800 number, they should not call Joe Namath, that they should be reaching out to you anytime they have an insurance related question. The last step, again, what we weren't going to talk too much about was going to be the setting, the retention. The biggest part of retention there, we have a whole nother training about the 7 touch points a year that you should be making with your clients. Retention and referrals go hand in hand. So make sure you do some research or give us a call. Check out the trainings that we have. We have an awesome retention white paper that we can, we'd love to share with you guys on that. But retention is a whole nother animal that's worth an entirely different 30-minute training on that. So we can answer any questions you guys have on retention. Let us know. Put them in that questionnaire box. We just want to be cognizant of everybody's time because you're coming to a sales webinar, not a retention webinar. So we want to be cognizant of your guys' time. Get the process down, adjust it. This is our 8-step selling process. Yours may look a little bit different. You should still include all of those steps, but the way you do it may look a little bit different. Do it the same each and every time. Get into that practice. Make sure it becomes a habit, and so that you have a better experience, and more importantly, your clients have a better experience.
I think that's one big thing to take away here is if you're still trying to be convinced on whether or not you need to have a set process, which I'm assuming probably most people, you know what I mean? This is
pretty,
pretty basic, but I think really just do it for your clients. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. This is something that could potentially, you know what I mean, be a huge conversation.
Absolutely.
Medicare is such a beast, and it's a beast for people who do know a lot about it, and it's definitely can be concerning or kind of, I don't know, scary is too dramatic of a word, but you know, especially if they're just now coming on Medicare, they don't know. This is a whole new world to them.
It is scary.
So having a set appointment, having a set process, and having people know exactly, okay, I'm going to go see my agent today. This is what I'm going to go through. They know exactly what to expect. They can breathe and they can feel like, you know, I feel like that's something that's super referable.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
So, yeah.
And Brian, I don't know the song Straight Up by Paula Abdul. Do you?
Maybe if I heard it.
You know, if I heard it, I might. I don't know that one. I'm sorry. That's the first big question we didn't know today.
Yeah.
Good for us.
Yay.
So anyways, guys, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, threats, and or promises, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'm going to stop recording.